Hey there YouTube, I'm Kitsu, this is the Ukitsu Times, welcome to my channel, welcome to a little bit of Darktide. So today we're going to be talking about this beauty over here. This is the Lock 2 Mark 2B Spearhead Boltgun. It is a wimpy little bolt gun for puny mortals and is not the sort of Godwin pattern that the Space Marines prefer using or the Storm Bolter that they prefer using. I don't even think that this is the one that the Sister Sororitas use, so yeah, this is the kind of thing that you're going to have to use if you've got puny, unaugmented arms that are not wearing power armor. Still, pretty big gun, very beefy, still capable of fairly rapid fire, and still putting out .75 caliber rounds that are filled with explosives. Very, very powerful gun. One of the more powerful ones in terms of the sheer damage that its gun can do. And yeah, we're going to be talking a little bit about some of the stuff that this thing can manage that are not in its open stats there, and we're going to sort of talk about what it's good for and what's not good for. So first of all, this gun has got fairly decent sights. I think the main improvement could be if there's like a little red dot on that center point there to make it a little bit easier to see, a little bit faster, a little bit more responsive. But otherwise, this is pretty decent sights, capable of getting a pretty easy headshot against targets at a decent number of ranges, and it's also very accurate when you're firing from aim down sights. Now, when you're firing aim down sights, you fire a single shot rather than a double shot, whereas when you're firing from the hip, you're required to fire a second shot. You can't fire just one. Now, you can fire full auto with this thing, and you have a lot of recoil and kick to fight against while you're doing that, but you can do it, keeping it relatively on target during a bit of fire. Enough to kill one of those guys at the very least. Or, more relevantly, it's pretty good against something like an Oberyn. So, minimum 2 shots, maximum of all 15 coming out of just one trigger pull. Generally speaking, you're going to want to fire a single shot with this thing against most targets because you will be killing a lot of things in one hit. There are things that will survive that single shot, but not a ton of them. So, other things about this gun that are not necessarily on the docket there. This gun, unlike many other ones, has a weird animation that you have to go through every time you pull the weapon out. And during this time, you can't fire it. So as you can see, I'm trying to fire it, can't do it. You have to wait until the animation plays before you're allowed to use this gun here. So if you're caught in an emergency situation, you're down a little bit of time before you can actually hit a target with this thing. So, another thing that's interesting about this gun here, of course, is that, as far as I can tell, I haven't really tested if it goes more than this, but we're going to go ahead and do a shot here. Hits 2 of these guys, doesn't go further. Going to try and hit many, many targets here. Hits 3 in that case, and 2 of them were Poxwalkers. So the gun is capable of hitting multiple targets and is hitting more than just a couple. It's even capable of getting through one of these guys and hitting another one. So this gun has decent penetration and can penetrate more elite targets than the last gun is capable of. If we wanted to, we could also see that penetrates through there. You can also see a little bit of that secondary explosion. When it hits the final target, it will explode, so we know that wasn't going to go through that guy, but the explosion does very little damage. The most important thing about that secondary explosion is that it does cause a lot of stagger to targets that are sort of standing around that. It's kind of hard, honestly, to test some of the elements of this gun just in this area, but that is sort of how this goes. Regardless, though, this is an all-around quite powerful gun. It's a very decent one for taking out very difficult to kill enemies. So let's talk a little bit about how this weapon performs in the various different categories there. Okay, so let's talk about the wave clear ability of the bolter, or the horde clear of this weapon. It's technically okay at this. The main thing that holds it back is its reload speed. It takes a very long time to reload the bolter. That means that after you fired your 15 shots, as effective as they are going to be, you're going to have a long gap between firing, meaning that you've got 15 shots of very valuable ammunition and then a long period for the enemy to catch up to you. Now, you've got a little bit more leeway than you think you do just because you're going to be suppressing the enemies quite heavily with the bolter, but that's often not going to be a great situation to find yourself in. It's also bad in the situation where you're firing at a lot of just generic mook-type enemies because there could be an elite that you needed that ammunition for, and having to wait several seconds to get your gun back online between that is a little bit more painful with the bolter than it is for other weapons. On the other hand, the damage that can do to a horde is substantial, especially because it's capable of piercing enemies that the cantrails cannot, meaning that you're capable of clearing out a decent number of people with this. You're capable of suppressing down a horde pretty effectively with it. I would say that it's mainly bad at this for the reasons of its reload speed and the low ammo count. Because the ammunition for the bolter is quite valuable, you don't have a ton of it, you're going to want to save that for higher value targets typically, unless you really have to empty this into something else. I do think that this is, generally speaking, a gun where you're going to definitely want a good horde clearing melee weapon. Now, on to its ability to take out high priority targets. This is to say the long range enemies and the elites and stuff like that. This is actually quite a good weapon for this. Even on the higher difficulties, you're typically going to be able to get those headshots, one-shot kills against a lot of them. You're going to be able to take out a decent number of those gunners because it's pretty accurate at doing those shots. The main thing that holds us back from being as good as the cantrails is that it takes much longer to bring this back on target. So if you miss a shot, if you hit a target but doesn't die, you miss the head and hit the torso, any of those sort of situations is going to cause your bolter to sway wildly out of alignment and take a very long time to come back into alignment for a second shot. Even if you're getting one-shot, one-kill headshots against dregs with guns, you're going to take a long time before you can line up shot against the second one, making this a pretty good gun for this role, but not amazing at it. There's going to be lots of instances where just not being able to go from shot to shot is going to be a little bit painful. The other thing that's bad about this is that it's difficult to chain past the 15th shot. What I'm talking about is when you're level 30, you're going to be using your volley fire, and if you've called out volley fire and you fired off your 15 shots, getting 15 headshot kills perfectly, you're still then going to have to reload the gun, and the reload animation is going to take so long that you're not going to have it reloaded in time to save your volley fire. By contrast, other guns that you could have will still allow you to fire off a shot and keep that volley fire chain going past reloads. Just doesn't work with the bolter. Now, the next category of armor penetration, this gun is actually quite good at killing armored targets. If you're firing at a fully armored Ogryn, this thing chews through carapace armor much better than most of the guns that you're going to be using, and even lets you chop through those guys fairly quickly in terms of compared to melee weapons. It's a really good way to eliminate an Ogryn if you just have to get rid of them quickly. And on a note of armor as well, it actually knocks back the bulwark shields with that first shot, giving you the opportunity to finish them off with body shots from the rest of your bolter clip. And that's because it throws back their shield, they expose their stomach, you can unload the rest of your bolter into that sort of area there, killing them. It's a very, very good weapon against these types of enemies. It's one of the better ones, I would say, for taking out these kinds of hard targets. And I would definitely say that this is a strong point of this gun. Better than melee weapons for this category is a really good place for them to be. Our next category is the emergency button. This gun has a huge penalty to that effect. It would be one of the better ones out there. Its spray and pray is really good at taking out enemies in a very short period of time. The main problem with this is that it has such a long wind-up time if you don't have it equipped. But if you are walking around, have the bolter equipped, and have the full 15 magazine in it, and then just switch to melee weapon when you need to use melee weapon, that style of gameplay is going to be pretty good at this. It's going to take out those sort of targets that are about to jump on you very effectively, and you're still going to have access to that sort of melee if you need to. It's still a little bit penalized by the fact that you're going to have a harder time pulling it out when you need it in those clutch instances, but it's not so bad because you can just opt to travel with it equipped, making it much, much more likely that you will have it when you need it. The last category is boss killing, and the bolter is pretty much the second best weapon in the game for boss killing, I'd say. The only one that's better is the plasma gun. It's capable of dumping out its 15 shell magazine, dealing tremendous damage very, very quickly against any of the sort of bosses that you're going to encounter. And because of this, it's capable of just dishing out a huge amount of damage to bosses very quickly. You retreat to a safe spot while you reload. It's just going to take you a very, very long time, but that's fine. And then you just get that huge sort of burst of damage again a second time around. It's pretty good for those sort of situations there. It's probably the best gun in the game for that sort of situation, just because you're getting so much damage out so quickly. But That's not necessarily going to always translate. There's a few instances against like the Demon Host where I find it's just a little bit hard to land shots with this thing full auto because the Demon Host just moves around too much. But that's a pretty rare situation for you to have to worry about. Good team generally won't wake the Demon Host. In any event, though, yeah, that's our sort of bolter there. I'd give this thing approximately... Maybe I'd give it a 3 on the crowd control for very different reasons than the Cantrell. It's got much better ability to crowd control when you are firing it. It's just that you can't fire it as continuously, and those longer breaks make it pretty bad for that purpose. It's just that when you are firing it, the effect is really, really tremendous. The next category of elite killing, I would give this gun about a 7. I think that it's pretty good at that role. If you're only killing about 7 or 15 things, depending on how tough they are, difficulty, then this is perfectly capable. It's where you're going past that this thing really falters compared to the other guns there. For armor killing, I'd say that this is probably... I might actually give this a perfect 10 because it will down those things faster than just about anything else in the game that exists. In terms of speed, it even takes out most Ogryns, the armored Ogryns, faster. So I would actually say that this is the standout of this game. I would say it's the perfect 10 for killing armored opponents. Even though I don't necessarily think you would think about it in that sort of capacity, and I wouldn't pick it just for that role, but it is definitely very, very good for that. The next one, the oh shit button, I would give this thing about a 3. It's just so good when it is equipped that it does sort of mitigate the long draw time for it, that it still works out pretty well in that regard. And for boss killing, I would give this thing about an 8, I'd say. Like I said, it's very, very good for that sort of thing. I might even give it a 9, but I find the plasma rifle just better by enough that I do actually think that this is sort of belongs more in about the 8 range. Very good for that role. You will be expending way too much extremely valuable ammunition when you're firing at bosses with this thing, but other than that, it's still a fairly good weapon for that sort of purpose there. Now, I would say that this is a gun that does really well on the veteran sharpshooter because that extra ammunition really helps out this gun, but I would say that it is also a pretty okay zealot weapon. There's a lot of things that you don't want to fight in melee against as the zealot, and this thing does pretty well against a couple of those. Especially like really tough armored opponents, it can be better to use a gun in some instances. Like if you're trying to deal with a shield Ogryn, it's kind of sometimes hard if you're by yourself to dance around them to get those back hits. It can be possible, it's definitely possible, but it's not the easiest thing to do. If you're using something like the bolter that can let you get through those pretty easily, it gives you something very effective against things like bosses that you otherwise don't really want to close too much into melee against, unless you're very good at sort of kiting them with a knife or something like that. There's just a lot of little situations where I think the bolter works well for a zealot, but again, you're going to be primarily relying on your melee weapon as them and then pulling them out for the fringe situations where you need to be able to do it. And this covers pretty much all those bases. This is a weapon that sort of can do a lot of things quite well but not for a sustained period. I think that works quite well for them in that sort of sense there. The other reason I would also say that the sharpshooter is the primary class for this is that they can get 50% reduction in reload speed. So it lets them reload this gun much, much, much faster. If you're sort of killing an elite or something like that, and you've got a bullet left in the chamber, you can reload the gun very quickly and makes it much smoother, much faster. And as a result, they sort of get rid of one of the major weaknesses of the gun, the other one, of course, being the equipped speed time. So, yeah, I think that this is just all around a fairly decent gun. Alright, and so yet again we're talking about the Bolter's builds, and we're only doing it again for the Veteran Sharpshooter, because primarily speaking they're the only class that really itemizes around their gun. So for your primary weapon, you're going to be looking, which is your melee weapon, you're going to be looking for something that's good at horde clearing, just so you can save on ammunition. Generally speaking, if you're forced to use your bolter consistently for horde clear, you're going to find yourself running out of ammunition very, very quickly, very often. Generally speaking, of course, the Minotaur Mark III Power Sword is going to be the best of the best in that regard. We're going to ignore it because it is overpowered. But something like the Catachan Combat Blade is pretty okay at horde clearing. Something like the Canaan Mark IV Assault Chainsword is quite good. The Kadishan Mark, any of them, Devil's Claw Swords are also quite good. Those are the sorts of weapons that are by default the ones that you would use as a veteran sharpshooter against hordes. The shovel also works. The axes tend to be for other sort of situations there. I would say that a similar philosophy works for the Zealot Preacher. If you're using the club or the Thunder Hammer or any other weapon that's really good against hordes, any of the ones that I mentioned as well for the veteran sharpshooter, then go ahead and use the bolter for the Zealot in those cases there. You're just going to find that if you're trying to rely too much on the bolter to clear out dregs and scabs and poxwalkers and stuff like that, you're just running out of ammunition all the time, and the rest of your party is going to be frustrated because you're taking all of the ammunition when you really shouldn't be. You should be using your sword against those sort of basic type of units there. So any of the weapons that works well against hordes is going to work well in this sort of situation there. Now, for feats, typically speaking, this is a weapon where you're going to want to emphasize your reload speed, just making it so that you can get through that faster. You're not necessarily as interested in chaining together shots, and this is one of the weapons where sustained fire can be very useful. So going from start to finish, your toughness feat can be, again, anything that you want there. This is one of the ones where exhilarating takedown can be useful because you are probably going to be going for quite a lot of headshots. The at arm's length is, as always, pretty reliable for this class, in my opinion, and confirmed kill. If you're on the higher difficulties and you're going to be using that weapon to hunt down the elites, that's going to be a lot of extra toughness quite quickly. For the next one, I really do think that tactical reload is the one that you're going to have to take there. You could take the demolition stockpile to make up for your relatively lackluster horde clearing, but 20% additional reload speed, because if we take a look at the bolter statistics here, it takes 5.71 seconds to reload this stupid thing. That's a huge amount of time. Having that makes it so much more pleasant to fire this gun. I would definitely recommend taking reload speed if you're capable. And that is, I think, a maximum roll on reload speed, I believe. Yeah, it's an 80% reload speed. If you've got a minimum roll reload speed version of this weapon here, what you're looking at is a much, much, much slower reload time there. So definitely something that I would consider taking no matter what you have there. For the next level, you can take anything that you're thinking of. Demolition Team is really good for getting those extra grenades. Like I said, you're probably not getting them from Demolition Stockpile in this instance. Bio-optic targeting is also pretty good there. Being able to sort of allow your teammates to take out those priority targets alongside you is always useful. For the next level, I think Unwavering Focus and Camo Expert are, again, the choices there. You're not going to be running and gunning with this a ton. I think that Unwavering Focus is probably not going to be the one that you do with this particular instance, since that kind of implies that you're going to be like standing out in the open and you're going to be like taking a lot of shots while you're trying to use your volley fire, going from gunner to gunner. This isn't really the situation where you want to be doing that, just because you're going to be standing still for such a long time between shots there. I find that Camo Expert is much better in that instance there. For the next level, Frag Storm, again, we're not playing around grenades too much. Deadshot, this actually works really well for making your gun deal way more damage and making it more accurate, but most of the time you just don't need Deadshot to get a kill with the bolter. I would definitely say that one after another is the other thing that you're going to want to take. That's the other one that makes us reload faster there. So get those elite kills, get that reload off of it. That's way, way stronger for this one. Sustained fire, like I mentioned there, plus 60% toughness recharge off of that. That's kind of fine. The big thing is it reloads your weapon, so you can go for like 15 really good shots or whatever, hit sustained fire, and immediately get another 15 shots off that. It can be very convenient by doing it that way. It also helps you sort of chew through bosses quite quickly. The other option, of course, is counterfire. This still works well with this gun. It's just that you're not going to be chain firing through a whole bunch of random mooks. You're going to just be doing one sort of one magazine's worth of it realistically. It is possible to actually reload and get another headshot between reloads. It's just really not consistent compared to other guns there. And the last one we have here is the bigger they are. This is actually viable with this one. Being able to take out an Ogrun with like half of the number of shots there. Being able to take out monstrosities and bosses. If you know you're going to require something that helps you kill bosses, then this can be something that lets you do that very, very effectively, very quickly, because you're going to be dumping the whole 15 shots out against that thing during the volley fire. The 5 seconds, no problem whatsoever, just chewing straight through the health. If you can get around behind a Beast of Nurgle, unload like 15 shots into its weak spot from behind while volley fire, the bigger they are is active, you're going to probably like chunk out half of its health bar in one go. Very, very effective, but it does negate your ability to be effective in a lot of other situations where you would want to be. I'd say all three are viable. Pick whichever one you think is going to come up and whichever complements your playstyle best. For example, I would take the bigger they are if I really struggle against those hard targets and those bosses and stuff like that. I would take Sustain Fire if I really find that I just need to be able to get in a longer firefight with this bolter without having to reload. There's lots of instances where that happens. This also does help against bosses. It lets you double up the ammo size, letting you fire twice as much, so that can be useful in that sort of sense there. And I would pick Counterfire in a lot of other situations where I just need to be able to highlight those enemies that I need to be taking out there. Definitely don't need the plus 25% weak spot damage, though. That's kind of a waste in this instance. But regardless, that is the sort of builds that I would do for the bolter. It's a fairly good weapon. It's got a lot of punch to it, but one of the things I want to emphasize is despite the reputation of the bolter, I would not say that this is a vastly stronger weapon than a lot of the other options out there. Still, it is a lot of fun to play. Go ahead and take it out there. And I do have to mention one weird thing about this, actually. I almost forgot. Unlike every other gun I've found, this does only have stagger against enemies as its stopping power stat. By contrast, if we look at the Columnus Mark V infantry auto gun, stopping power is the damage versus armor stat. For some reason, whatever it is, the Boltgun doesn't have an armor penetration stat. It just has an innately very high armor stat, or anti-armor stat. So keep that in mind when you're looking at these. Unlike every other gun in the game that has a stopping power, the stopping power for the Boltgun really doesn't matter. You're only looking for, honestly, in my opinion, reload speed and damage. Those are kind of your big stats in this one. You can care about stability, you can care about mobility, but reload speed, damage are definitely the stats that I would go for first with this weapon. So anyway, that is going to be our video. We're just going to play the rest of the round out for you guys. So hope you found this one enjoyable, and of course, as always, hope to see you guys all next time.
You're a big target, lad. The train's running overtime, don't they? Yeah. Now you die, hound! ground! Step back!
He's dead!
Grenade!
There's no way back!
Throw grenade!
Gunner!
He's up front! Bastion 220 combat stunts! That's a horde!
Encounter backup with you, Tom! Out of my mind!
Here they come! The zealots didn't mean to be so brave! I am his holy right hand! No more fighting! Unsighted! Bomber! Find cover! Yes! Scout shotgun on! Down into darkness. This looks bad. Don't waste ammo! Wait for a clean shot! Scout shotgun on! It's a mercy! Scout shotgun up!
You're in the lucky storm now. Let's get to it.
Is this what we came for?
He who holds the Lodge's Johnson controls everything that comes in and out of this high sector.
We better take you back sharpish then. You'd only misuse it! Killed the Ranger, fellas! Really missed the guard. Being part of something bigger.
I'm sure you'll do your comrades proud, Roughneck.
If the Astra Militarum are a mighty hammer, we are the surgeon scalpel. Eliminating primary target!
Medicaid station!
Get patched up! Perhaps you should spend more time in flagellation, if that wound
Medipack!
pained you so.
Gosh, I didn't realize you were a surgeon too, Zealot.